Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Fox 45 News in Depth. I'm Mackenzie Frost. The Department of Juvenile Services in the hot seat following shocking video showing a 66-year-old man being robbed and beaten. And a warning, the video is disturbing to watch. The attack happened 1 week ago today. 66-year-old Bernie telling Fox 45 News he was getting home last Thursday night. The victim left with a black eye, 7 stitches. He says 5 suspects attacked him, police arresting 18-year-old Montez Bailey and 15-year-old boy. The 15-year-old initially released to his guardians, but both suspects have since been charged as adults with attempted murder. The victim frustrated with what he calls a lack of accountability for young offenders.
You're actually breeding criminals. You're not telling them that if they commit a crime, you're held accountable for it. What they're saying is, go do it again. Go do it again. Go do it again.
That case highlights a growing problem with juvenile crime and accountability. In Baltimore City, in just the past 7 days, at least 11 teenagers have been arrested for crimes like robbery, car theft, and assault. Many of those juveniles were released to their guardians and have prior arrests for similar crimes. The problem extends beyond the city limits. In Baltimore County, juvenile crime has been a problem at the Towson Town Center for months. Fox 45 News has seen examples of young people assaulting and robbing people, among other crimes. Now, Baltimore County police say they have an arrest warrant for a teenager in connection to a shooting in the Rogers Forge neighborhood last month.
What happens a lot of times is we have a system where juveniles are arrested, they are released to their parents or their guardians, and then they're recommitting crimes again, sometimes the same day. Often when these things happen, we find that it's people that have committed other crimes. And, I don't know that for sure here, but it just seems like a lot of the things we have in the region are reoffenders who continue to traumatize new people.
In Anne Arundel County, we have seen juveniles stealing cars and committing armed robberies. Just this week, Fox 45 News confirming a group of 4 teenagers in a stolen car crashed into a family's home. Police say the teens range in age from 13 to 16. All 4 of them were released to their guardians.
They needed to spend a couple nights in jail, something. They need, even if they're not with the general population, they need something. There's no fear instilled in them. Like, they did it, and then they went home to their house that's not damaged.
And in Prince George's County last year, police say a 15-year-old known as Baby K tried to shoot another student in the head on a school bus. In recent weeks, police say a 12-year-old boy has been on a crime spree in Prince George's and Montgomery counties. Police say he has been caught and arrested for stealing cars in Montgomery County at least 10 times.
There is no abatement here. There is no abatement whatsoever. The sheer criminality that he's involved in has not been abated. It puts our community at risk, extreme risk.
And that's just a fraction of the cases of juvenile crime we've covered over the past few months, leaving law enforcement, prosecutors, and residents frustrated, calling for change. Naomi Katz joins us now live. She has firsthand experience with juvenile crime. Naomi, first of all, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. First of all, why don't you just tell everybody exactly what happened just a few years ago?
Yeah, I parked right in front of my house. I was walking to my front doors. Right before I could get in, 3 people approached me with guns to my head. They took my car keys, and there's a whole group of people, about 7 of them, just waiting for, it was like they just wanted the next victim.
And this was in Baltimore City?
In Butchers Hill. In
Butchers Hill. And what happened when they approached you?
They approached me with guns. They said that they'd kill me and that they wanted me to die.
What was going through your head in that moment? Oh my gosh.
I just wanted to give them my keys. It wasn't worth fighting. They pushed me down, and it was pretty traumatizing.
I can't even imagine. I'm so sorry that happened to you. What happened after the group of young people I'm assuming, ran away or drove away.
Yeah, I called the police and they showed up within 3 minutes, and they found my car. About 2 hours later, it was totaled and they just left the doors open. So an officer stopped and noticed, and then they found my information and called me.
Okay. And then did you end up staying in that same neighborhood or did you leave?
No, I moved about a month later as soon as I could break my lease.
Why did you want to leave?
I didn't feel safe. I mean, I parked right in front of my house and it was only a few feet. I feel like they were waiting for someone and they spotted my car. It didn't matter who I was.
Do you believe that enough is being done to hold young people accountable?
No, I don't really know whatever happens with it, and it was really traumatizing. I still have nightmares, and I don't like leaving my house.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Thank you for sharing your story. It's important, and hopefully you feel safe now and you're able to put this behind you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. The latest Baltimore City Police data show juvenile carjackings and robberies have skyrocketed in just the past few years. The city saw 212 car thefts and carjackings from January to July of this year, up from 129 in 2023 and 82 in 2022. Juvenile robberies have nearly quadrupled compared to the same time last year, 246 this year compared to 56 last year and just 17 in 2022. Overall, police report 590 juvenile cases in 2024, up from 304 in 2023 and 191 in 2022. Despite participating in legislative hearings before session began last fall and a 90-day legislative session debating juvenile crime policies, the Department of Juvenile Services announced in a news release this week significant policy changes. Several elected leaders called the changes a good first step, but some argue more needs to be done, and the changes are raising even more questions about how decisions are made within DJS. It's the video taking the state by storm, and the desperate pleas from a daughter, distraught as her father lies on the ground motionless. Bernie, unconscious.
You know, they look at it as a game, you know, like let's go hunt down some more old people.
The Department of Juvenile Services releasing the 15-year-old suspect to his guardian. Tuesday morning, DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi announcing a shift in policy. Now, kids who are not detained but accused of a violent felony will be placed on electronic monitoring. And those kids already wearing an ankle monitor who go on to commit another violent felony will be detained.
I definitely believe it's a step in the right direction, but we have a long way to go.
Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates says he's been in communication with Governor Wes Moore and welcomes the policy shift. But Bates raises questions about what the policy was before when a young person wearing an ankle monitor commits another crime. Due to the change, it's possible kids were not detained when they committed another crime while under supervision.
It appears that way.
Wednesday, we asked DJS, sending questions like what sparked the department to make the policy change? What was the policy before? Specifically, what happened to kids who were already wearing an ankle monitor who were accused of committing another crime? DJS not directly answering all of those questions, but in a statement, a spokesperson says before the switch, some were still detained, but that determination was not mandatory. We've been reporting on issues with ankle monitors in DJS for more than a year. Tristan Jackson, one of the suspects in the Brooklyn Day mass shooting, wearing an ankle monitor when gunfire erupted at the block party. Jackson already on DJS supervision stemming from an incident in February 2023 when he brought a loaded gun to Mervo High School, months before the deadliest mass shooting in Baltimore's history. But it's not just one example. A mom telling Fox 45 News last September her daughter continued to steal cars while on DJS supervision.
When she came home, she went out and stole the car that night and been getting arrested since on home detention.
We have seen cases here and certainly in Baltimore where children who were on ankle monitors committed further crimes.
Prince George's County State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy says the key will be whether DJS can actually monitor the juveniles.
Really ensuring that those monitoring devices are being actually monitored, that they're working, and that DJS is responsive when a ankle monitor is either no longer working or it's the young person is in violation of their monitor agreement.
And while the changes are happening now, the question is, why didn't these policy shifts happen sooner, especially given the concerns surrounding young people and crime? Now, the DJS intake policy once again under fire this week after the 15-year-old suspect in last week's Butchers Hill assault was released to his parents. DJS is required by state law to refer all violent crime charges to the state's attorney's office rather than releasing the suspect. But the teen in this case was only charged with robbery, which DJS does not treat as a violent crime. Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates says DJS's new policies are a step in the right direction, but there still needs to be more done to hold young people accountable.
We're the lawyers, and DJS, they're not the lawyers. So sometimes they look at things differently than we would look at with our analysis under the law, and that is frustrating.
DJS intake officers, who are caseworkers, not necessarily legal experts, ultimately decide whether juvenile suspects are taken into custody or released. Right now, DJS has 25 days to conduct their intake process, but that will drop to 15 days under a new law starting November 1st, unless a police officer formally recommends the suspect is detained. In that case, DJS will only have 2 days to make a recommendation. Still to come, lawmakers also weighing in on DJS policies and the changes to come. We hear what they have to say about Secretary Schiraldi and what they want to see from the department moving forward. And as we head to break, let's take a look at some of today's top headlines.
Come December, Baltimore's 61 Catholic churches will be closed and consolidated into 23 parishes and 30 worship sites. Parishioner Ed Marcinko now heartbroken for those about to lose their lifelong church homes and fearful his won't last much longer.
End of December, January 5th, all these churches are going to have one last mass where then it's going to be officially merged and or closed.
It's been almost 3 weeks since this moment.
I heard him say something to the effect of, he shot me or you shot me or something to that effect. And that's when I said, call 911, call 911.
50-year-old Mark McKenzie was shot and seriously hurt during an attempted robbery by his home in Rogers Forge. Now, police confirm they are searching for a male juvenile suspect, and a warrant is out for their arrest. On social media, Baltimore County Council member Mike Ertel says they're looking for a teenager.
Following last week's brutal attack in Butchers Hill, hundreds of residents have now signed a petition calling for DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi's removal. They say his policies, including his reluctance for detaining juveniles or putting them on probation, have led to ongoing crime sprees.
Schiraldi's been a mess, and people are concerned, and they're tense, and they're frustrated, and they're upset about it.
He's not providing rehabilitation at juvenile services, and I don't get it. I would like an explanation from the governor of why he's still supporting Vincent.
Senate and House Republicans sent this letter to Governor Wes Moore this week, calling on him to replace Secretary Schiraldi. I asked Governor Moore about the Butchers Hill attack and whether he still stands behind the secretary.
We're all praying for Bernie and praying for his safe recovery. But the thing that we know is we are working together to ensure that we can keep our communities safe.
Does that mean Secretary Schiraldi, he still has your support?
We are going to continue working together to make sure our communities are safe.
Not really a direct yes or no from the governor regarding his support for the secretary, but I spoke with Senate Minority Whip Justin Reedy about that letter to the governor and what he wants to see change within DJS.
Well, look, it's just very clear that the concerns that, frankly, all of our Republican senators had when we voted against his nomination have really come to fruition. And you always hate to say we told you so, but the way that he's been managing this department very clearly is what we were concerned about from his history. Really a lack of a belief in strong accountability for juvenile offenders.
Take on the policy shifts that DJS announced Tuesday morning now via news release, kind of coming perhaps by surprise for some people.
Well, I think frankly, it's a little bit of damage control, it seems to me. And while I'm glad at any time, I'm glad to see responsiveness about the need to take steps. I have a lot of questions about whether some of these monitoring things really work to solve the issues that we're seeing. Obviously, monitoring is better than not monitoring. But to me, I just don't understand how we would be in a place where a 15-year-old who assaulted someone and robbed them could ever be released to their parents the same night, or their guardians the same night. To me, that's just insane. So I'm glad they're talking about doing better with monitoring, but I have a lot of concerns about these monitoring systems and also whether DJS is really watching it.
Why do you think the department made the changes when they did, given the long history of conversations everyone has been having?
To me, it's a mystery how these changes weren't being made with all the hearings. No change in practice. And so we're still dealing with this situation where teenagers that have committed a series of bad crimes, and in this case, obviously a really violent crime, are just being handed back over like they stole something from a convenience store or something, and he assaulted somebody. It's insane to me.
That concern gets to the heart of one of the questions we've been asking DJS. Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates says the department does not consider robberies a violent crime. And in the city, Bates says 115 young people have been arrested on robbery charges this year. 32 were detained.
Things like that are concerning because we would like to be able to have a seat at the table a little quicker.
The FBI defines robbery as the taking or attempt of anything of value by force or threat to force or violence, and or putting the victim in fear. Our questions to DJS about whether it will consider robbery a violent crime have gone unanswered. Do you think that the legislature should come back in January and look at the definitions of some of these crimes to mandate DJS treat them as what they are?
I think that's a great idea to do that. I think, again, also I think if maybe not in this specific case doesn't apply, but somebody who's repeatedly done something like stolen cars repeatedly, that needs to be escalated. Robbery, though, to me, if you're robbing somebody, I don't understand why we're not treating that as a more violent crime.
Have you had any conversations with the governor following that letter that was sent earlier this week?
I have not. No, I don't know that we've heard anything official from his administration yet.
Following the conversations that everyone had last session, looking at the laws, is there anything more that the General Assembly can do in this space?
Well, I think oversight is key. And so the committees that have oversight over DJS, including the budget committees that deal with funding, but also the judicial committees, they need to be demanding to see all of the records of how DJS is currently monitoring these offenders.
Now, we did send questions to the members of the House Judiciary Committee and Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, asking them about the Butchers Hill attack and DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi. We got several responses, including Republican Delegate Stuart Schmidt, who says he does not support Secretary Schiraldi. Republican Delegate Christopher Tomlinson says, quote, "The reality is that juveniles are not being held accountable, and a lot of that falls on DJS." Most of the members of the committees did not respond. Democrat Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes, who is a member of the Judiciary Committee, tells us our question should be directed to the Speaker of the House, Adrian Jones. Maryland's 46th District delegates and Senate President Bill Ferguson, who represents this area of Baltimore City, did release a statement after last week's incident, saying they were horrified by the robbery and DJS's release of the suspect. They also said they're in touch with the Secretary and Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates to discuss a path forward. Now, joining us now is Maryland House Minority Leader Jason Buckle. Thank you so much for joining us, Delegate. First, what's your reaction to some of your colleagues saying that our question should go to the Speaker when they're on the committee overseeing juvenile justice policy in the state?
Well, that's a little bit surprising. That's the first time just a few seconds ago that I heard that. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we all have a degree of accountability and responsibility to address these issues. Certainly the Speaker, the Senate President, Senator Ferguson, who lives there in Baltimore City in this region. They have an outsized role in kind of determining what policies and what legislation will be advanced or not. But, I don't think it's the problem. What I hear with a lot of it is punting. Let's punt it to somebody else. Let's punt it to somewhere else. The truth is we all need to work together now to ensure accountability. And as you've talked about in your segment this evening, we worked and put together a letter to the governor. It's not just to get media attention. It's to help to try to highlight the issue that Secretary Schiraldi and where the DJS policies seem to go is not the direction that Marylanders need. And it's not all his fault. There were problems with juvenile justice before he came to Maryland. There may be problems after he leaves. But he's not the agent of change. He's not somebody who's going to steer this department in a course that really helps people. The Bolton Hill incident just highlights it. It's really maybe the camel that breaks the straw's back, because things like this are going on seemingly almost every week, every month, and in a lot of jurisdictions. You have juveniles committing more serious crimes, not just in Baltimore City, not just in the Baltimore region, but from Western Maryland, where I'm from, to the Eastern Shore and a lot of points in between. And it's not getting addressed correctly by this department.
So, Delegate, what will it take? What can lawmakers do next session, given everything that we have seen go on earlier this year? 90 days, I feel like we had infinite conversations talking about juvenile justice. We see this policy change come from DJS this week, which indicates that this was something that could have been done earlier. What will lawmakers do next session to take this even further if you believe that's necessary?
Well, I think one thing that just from your investigation and reporting of this that is jarring to me that we should really address, and we'll begin working up legislation to address, is if the Department of Juvenile Justice is saying we don't view robbery as a violent crime, so we don't require detention or additional steps for juveniles charged with robbery. I think that is ridiculous, because both you just read what the FBI defines it as. I practice law in Maryland for a living. I don't do criminal law, but I just looked it up on my cell phone in 30 seconds and found that under Maryland's common law, which I took the bar exam a long time ago, so sometimes I don't want to speak too much and say I missed that, but I did remember this. Robbery does involve either force or the threat of force. It involves threatening someone, if you don't give me this, I'm going to hurt you, or it involves actually committing some physical act toward them to take it away. That's different than theft. That's different than burglary, where someone may not even be in the house and you broke in and took it. Theft, it's just a product. You took it without any threat of force. Robbery is a crime of violence. And if they're not doing that, then we need to pass a law that very clearly says robbery is a crime of violence. You need to do that with these kids.
All right, Delegate Buckle, thank you for your time. Keep us updated if that legislation is in fact drafted, and
Yes.
We'll have the conversations, I'm sure, in the days and weeks to come.
Great. Thank you, Mackenzie, and thank you for your efforts on this issue.
Thanks. Former governor and Republican U.S. Senate candidate Larry Hogan also weighing in. He says he understands Republicans' concerns surrounding Schiraldi, and the department might need a change if the current leader can't get the job done.
Some of the policies that he espouses are exactly opposite of what we need. Seems like he disagrees with the governor on some things, but the policies that DJS has been currently enacting are complete failures. And if he can't get things changed, then maybe Westmore ought to consider putting somebody else in there that can get the job done.
We also reached out to Democratic Senate candidate and Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks in her official capacity for her thoughts on the DJS policies and the secretary, but so far we haven't heard back. We also invited Secretary Schiraldi himself for an interview. His office responded, saying Schiraldi was not available. This week, we asked if you think it's time for new leadership at the Department of Juvenile Services. We'll take a look at some of your responses when we come back. This week, we asked if you think it's time for new leadership at the Department of Juvenile Services. Let's take a look at what some people are saying. Overwhelmingly, most people who responded say, yes, we need new leadership top to bottom in the entire state. Delicia, yes. We have one other response. It will make no difference who's in charge. The Democrats of the General Assembly talked about the juvenile justice laws, and someone else said, Ellie said, I say there needs to be people in power that understands the dynamics of the economy and everything else. So thank you all for your responses. Keep them coming. That's all for this week's edition of Fox 45 News in Depth. I'm Mackenzie Frost. Mary?
I'm Kai Jackson. Thank you for watching. Here's another video to watch. Also, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel.